Good evening and a good Chodesh. Tonight we're entering the Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av, and the month of Av is associated, as we all know, with some unhappy events, starting from, of course, the destruction of the both temples, and there was events prior to that took place in Jewish history, and based on that, on those events that it says, our sages tell us that Mishen Nichnas Av Mematim Besimcha, that once the month of Av comes in, we have to reduce in joyous things, like we don't participate in parties in these days. We don't listen to music. We don't, and from the beginning of Av until Tisha B'Av, we don't eat meat. We don't drink wine, except for Shabbat, of course. So it's all associated with mornings. And tonight, what we want to talk about is how we can see and take out the inner essence of these events, and how we can get strength from the challenges themselves. And it's basically having a whole different look on everything what is happening in our life. In fact, in the Hasidic interpretation of this statement that we just said, that when the month of Av comes in, we have to reduce in joy. So there is an interpretation that says that Mishenichnas Av, from the time the month of Av comes in, Mematim, we have to reduce. What do we reduce? We reduce the negativity. We reduce the bad things, the bad energy that we have. How do we do it? Besimcha, with joy. So it's a play on words, but it really has a deep meaning to it. Obviously, we're not talking about joy that is forbidden by the Torah. We're talking about joy that is permissible by the Torah, like the joy of studying Torah. That itself is joy. So whatever joy we're able to do in these days, we should increase. And by this, we're able to reduce the negative parts of the month of Av, as we shall explain. So this Shabbos, which is the Shabbos prior to Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, we call it Shabbos Chazon. Why do we call it Shabbos Chazon? It is based on the Haftarah, the reading of that we read from the prophets in the synagogue. The 3 weeks prior to Tisha B'Av, we read 3 prophets that talk about the rebuke and destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. And this Shabbos, we read the prophet of Isaiah, Yeshaya, and it's called Chazon. Chazon means the vision. I'm going to read inside. Just a second. Here we go. It says, starting from the 17th of Tammuz, we begin to read these 3 haftarahs of rebuke. This is the prophets, namely the 3 sections beginning with Divrei Yirmiyahu, Shimo Dvar Hashem, and Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Yeshayahu. Now, what is the vision of Yeshayahu? Very, very unpleasant thing. He talks about the destruction. He talks about the people, the Jewish people, not following the laws. And this is something that we read before Tisha B'Av to remind us of what brought us here in the first place. Indeed, back in the days, there was even a custom in some communities, some Jewish communities, that on this Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, they wouldn't even wear Shabbos clothing. That's how far. Although that custom did not prevail today, we don't follow this custom, but you can see it. We're gonna look inside, see what it says here. Comes from here, that it says over here. Our rabbis had the custom to adjust their Shabbos dress and Shabbos chazan by not changing into the typical Shabbos clothing. This was done to demonstrate a small sign of mourning. And it says, Veda. However, today, we don't follow this custom. So for 2 or 3 generations, this has not been the custom in our communities on Shabbos Chazon. Rather, we wear all the typical Shabbos clothing. Even the leaders of the previous generations would likewise wear all the typical Shabbos clothing, explaining that failure to do so would be akin to mourning publicly on Shabbos. So for this reason, is that we wear Shabbos clothing even when the 9th of Av itself follows on Shabbos. So basically what it says that today we do not follow that custom of wearing the not Shabbos clothing, and that is because on Shabbos we're not allowed to mourn, and if you change something, you do something different, it is like you mourn publicly on Shabbos. And indeed, the Rebbe pointed out, and he said that in these Shabbos, between the 3 weeks, we should actually increase in joy in order to bring out the best, the goodness of it, and not to show, God forbid, that we're mourning. So this is one way of seeing, understanding this Shabbos, that you look at it on the face value. Shabbos Chazoin is the Shabbos that we have the vision where the prophet Isaiah talks about the destruction. However, we have a whole different vision that we find from the Hasidic sources, and this comes from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Bardichev, who was the famous great sage, the lover of the Jewish people, the defense attorney of the Jewish people. He would always find something nice and good to say about the Jewish people. However, in this Shabbos, he says something very interesting. He says, Shabbos Chazoin, it's called the Shabbos Chazoin, which means Chazoin means the vision, because each and every one of us has a vision. What is the vision that we have? We have a vision of the 3rd Beis HaMikdash. So stay tuned. This Shabbos, Friday night Shabbos, you're going to see the 3rd Beis HaMikdash, the 3rd temple. What does that mean? So he gives an example. He uses a metaphor. Let's see it inside. So the theme of Shabbos Chazoin is illustrated by a parable. There was once a father who had a precious child for whom he made an expensive piece of clothing. The child wasn't careful with it, so it ripped into many pieces. The father made another such garment, which the child ripped as well. What did the father do? He made a 3rd garment, but instead of giving it to the child to wear, he stored it away, only showing it to the child rarely on special occasions. And he would say, see, if you behave correctly, you will be allowed to wear it. Says the Reb Levitzak of Bardichev, in this fashion, the father was getting his son used to behaving appropriately until such behavior would become second nature. Then there would be no reason to worry. And he continues and says, this is the meaning of Shabbos Chazoin, the Shabbos of the vision, where every Jew is shown a vision of the 3rd temple from afar. Okay. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean? Shabbos, a vision, you're seeing a temple from afar. What exactly does it mean? So obviously, if I ask you, I don't know about you, maybe you saw it last year. I didn't see it. Shlomo, did you see it, the Beis Hamikdash?
Yeah.
Maybe Shlomo saw it.
At nighttime.
At nighttime. In any case, what does it mean, the vision? What does it mean you see the Beis Hamikdash? You see the temple. So the seeing of the temple is more of a spiritual inner vision. So sometimes, for example, a person has a feeling, has a desire to do something positive. It is because something inside of him subconsciously pushes him to do something good. It happens. Where is it coming from? It comes from an inner vision, an inner sight that the neshama feels something, the neshama sees something. So this is the idea of the vision. The vision that every Shabbos Chazon, the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, Hashem shows us the third Beis Hamikdash, and Hashem allows us to connect with ourselves, to connect with our inner self, and to be able to see to be able to improve our ways to the point that we will be worthy for the Beis Hamikdash. Now, the question is, however, what's happening over here? On the one hand, we say that Shabbos Chazon is a whole different, it's a terrible thing. It's a time when some people in some communities back in the olden days would not even wear Shabbos clothing. And yet, as we always say here in Chabad of Sheepshead Bay, this Shabbos is a special Shabbos. We do it about every Shabbos. But especially in Shabbos Chazon, we said it's a special Shabbos. So which way is it? So we need to understand, to take it a little deeper. In order to understand this a little deeper, we want to talk about the destruction of the temple that we mourn now these days. Both temples, the first temple and the second temple, were destroyed on Tisha B'Av. The question is, who destroyed them? Who was the one to destroy the temple? We know the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, who sent his chief of staff, Nebuzaradan, and that was in the year 423 BCE. The second temple was destroyed, of course, by the Romans. And that was destroyed through, who was there? The emperor Vespasian and his son Titus. And that was in the year 69 CE. But if you see in the verses of the Torah makes it very clear that Nebuchadnezzar in his time and Vespasian in his time, they were not really the forces that brought the temple down. The temple came down because Hashem decided that the time was up. We see even in the verses the point that this Nebuchadnezzar, the notorious, horrible guy, who committed an endless list of horrific crimes against humanity and the Jewish people, still the Torah calls him God's messenger, and the servant of God, as if he was there sent by God to destroy this. Let's see it inside. It says, this comes from the book of Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu. Behold, I send, and I will take all the families of the north, God says, and to Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and I will bring them upon this land and upon its inhabitants and upon all these nations around, and I will destroy them and make them for a desolation and for a hissing and for a perpetual ruins. So we see that really, in the end of the day, it was Hashem, it was God. Nothing, Nebuchadnezzar couldn't do anything without Hashem's approval, so to speak. And so here is the question. It's actually, the question is, we know that God gave us laws in the Torah. But the laws that God gave us, he himself also follows the same laws, as the Medrash says. Every law that God gave us, he himself follows as well. Regarding the temple, the destruction of the temple, there are clear prohibitions in the Torah. The Torah says, number one is not allowed to destroy property. We're not allowed to just destroy property. It's called Bal Tashchis. You're not allowed to destroy it. Now you understand why your grandmother always kept everything on the boidim, all the old shmatas. You can't throw out things. Bal Tashchis, everything is, you can't just throw out things, you can't just destroy things. Valuables you have to keep. So how can God destroy the temple? If he follows the rules, how could he destroy the temple? More than that, there is a special law that talks about holy places, a synagogue, a temple, that there is a particular law, in addition to just destroying property, there is a special law that says one is not allowed to destroy the temple or any holy sites. So if we say that God is the one who sent Nebuchadnezzar to destroy, that means it was God's hand. How could God, being that God follows himself the laws of the Torah, how could he allow such a thing to happen? So let's see it inside. One thing that can be answered is the fact that we're talking about destroying property. There's perhaps a way to answer it. Why? Because the only way a person is not allowed to destroy property if there is no use from the destruction. But in the case of the Beis HaMikdash, the case of the temple, our sages tell us that the destruction actually served a purpose, and the purpose was that in the destruction of the physical building came in place of, God forbid, destroying the people. Instead of, God forbid, destroying the whole Jewish people, God put his wrath on the building, so to speak. Let's see it inside. So this comes from the Medrash. It says, the verse states, a song of Asaph, O God, nations have come into your heritage. They have defiled your holy temple. They have made Jerusalem into heaps. Shouldn't the verse said a weeping of Asaph, a wail of Asaph, a lament of Asaph? Why does it say a song of Asaph? We're talking about the destruction of the temple, for heaven's sake. So why do you call it a song? It makes a song out of it, out of destroying the temple. Says the Medrash, it says this is analogous to a king who built a nuptial home for his son, and had it beautifully plastered, inlaid and decorated, and this son strayed off to an evil lifestyle. So the king came to the nuptial canopy, tore down the tapestries, and broke the rails. The prince's tutor took a flute and began to play. Those who saw him asked, the king is overturning the nuptial canopy of his son, and you sit and sing? He said to them, I am singing because the king overturned his son's nuptial canopy and did not vent his wrath upon his son. Rather than killing his son, he put his anger on the canopy. So too, Asaph was asked, God destroyed the temple and sanctuary, and you sit and sing? And he replied, I am singing because God vented his wrath upon wood and stone and did not vent his wrath upon Israel. So that's what Asaph is saying. And that explains why it would be okay, halachically speaking, for Hashem to destroy the temple, so to take out the wrath on the building and the stone and not on the people. However, this explains only one thing. It still doesn't explain the second part of the question. And that is, after all, there's also special law in the Torah that one is not allowed to destroy a holy site. And that cannot be explained just by putting out the wrath on the site, but because this is a holy site. So we'll get to the answer, which will give us a whole different, profound understanding on the whole concept of destruction and exile and so on. And the Rebbe, with a careful review of the relevant laws, talks about it in the light of the profound Hasidic teaching about the temple's destruction. And he helps us understand these questions. And the answer is based on the following medrash. Let's look inside in the medrash. Says the medrash like this. Rav said, a lion arose under the constellation lion, and destroyed the lion of God. A lion arose refers to Nebuchadnezzar, of whom the verse states, a lion has come up from his thicket. Under the constellation lion refers to the fifth. No, just a second. I'm sorry, just a second. Hold on 1 second. Tzipi? Tzipi? Okay, I apologize. 1 second. I'll be right back. Outside by the window. See it?
Oh, I got it.
Yeah?
Okay. Sorry to.
No problem.
Thank you.
I'm back. Sorry about this. Okay. We'll continue. So we continue here under the constellation of lions. So we're talking about the lion that came and destroyed the lion in the constellation of lion. What does that mean? Nebuchadnezzar is considered the lion, and he destroyed the temple, which is considered a lion. The temple was in the shape of a lion. When in the month of lion, the constellation of lion. The month of Av also is the sign of the lion. And what is the purpose? And destroy the lion refers to the area, Jerusalem, the city where David lived. All this took place so that a lion will come in the future during the constellation lion and rebuild the lion of God. A lion will come refers to God, as the verse states, a lion has roared, who will not fear? The Lord God has spoken. So we see that the lion is a reference to God. During the constellation Lion refers to the month of Av, or the verse 8, and I will turn their mourning into joy. That the month of Av, which is a mourning, God will turn it into joy. And rebuild the Lion of God, as the verse states, God is the builder of Jerusalem. He will gather the outcasts of Israel. So what we see from here is the idea of the destruction. So first of all, we have to understand, why does he use the same term, the lion, what's going on over here? The lion with the lion, is this, what is it all about the lion? Why do we refer the same thing as the Nebuchadnezzar, the lion, is destroying the lion, the month of lions, so the lion, God will come and build the lion in the month of lion? Why is it all referred in the same thing? We can say simply, Nebuchadnezzar will come, he'll destroy the temple, for that God will come and build the temple. The fact that it's all referenced in that way is to show, says the Rebbe, that really it is all one thing. The destruction is part of the building. It's not like two separate things. And here explains the Rebbe that the law says that one is not allowed to destroy a synagogue. As we asked, how could God allow the destruction of the temple if he follows the laws of the Torah? One is not allowed to destroy a synagogue only if it's for the sake of destruction. But if it's not for the sake of the destruction, but rather it is for the sake of building, then the destruction is considered part of the building. And this is what is referenced to the fact that it's all referenced into the same way, in the same, using the same metaphor. Let's see what the way the Rebbe explains it. Let's read inside. It says, this was the whole purpose of the temple's destruction. God wished to improve the temple so that it would no longer be a man-made structure, which eventually ceases to exist. Rather, it would become a divine structure, an eternal edifice. Thus, the first and second temple were destroyed as a means to pave the way for building an enhanced edifice, the third temple, which will be a divine structure. It emerges that ultimately the destruction of the two temples was an act of building, not an act of ruin and destruction. So this gives us a different understanding. However, the problem is not completely solved yet. There is a little more depth into it. Because, why? What's the problem? Does anybody know any problem with this metaphor, with this explanation? The problem is very simple. We're saying you're destroying a temple, you're destroying a synagogue. When is it not considered destroying if the destruction is for the sake of building? But if the destroying of the synagogue, if let's say you destroy a synagogue and then you wait, okay, I'm going to wait until I raise the money for 10 years and then I'm going to build another synagogue, that's not allowed. That's not okay. The only way you're allowed to put down a synagogue is right away. You're going to build right away. Then the destruction is part of the building. And here, what do we see? The temple was destroyed when? Close to 2,000 years ago. So there, the question comes back, how is that okay? How is that okay to destroy a temple? Even let's say it was for the purpose to build a new temple, a better temple, a nicer temple, an everlasting temple, but still, what about the meantime? 2,000 years of suffering in exile, no temple, no nothing. So here comes the explanation and the view the Rebbe guides us, the Rebbe teaches us how we are supposed to look at this. I mean, here's before we get to the answer, is an interesting part of the Talmud that illustrate the point that we just said. It says, when Rav Ashi saw cracks in the synagogue of the town Mata Mechasya, he demolished it. He demolished the synagogue because there was cracks. They needed to rebuild it. But what did he do next? He then brought his bed there, meaning to the building site, to prevent any delays in destruction. And he did not remove it until they had even affixed drain pipes to the structure. So we see how Rav Ashi realized that how by him it was so important to make sure that this is not delayed. He brought his bed to the building site to make sure. I haven't seen rabbis these days do this, but this is the way he felt about not delaying building of a synagogue. And yet the temple lies in ruins for so many years. So let's get to the answer. The answer, says the Rebbe, we can see it in, there's an interesting story from the Medrash. The Medrash says, a man was plowing when his cow suddenly called out. An Arab was passing by and heard the cow. He said, Jew, Jew, unyoke your cow, free the stake of your plow, for your holy temple has now been destroyed. The cow then lowed a second time. Said the Arab, Jew, Jew, yoke your cow, reset the stake of your plow, for the Redeemer has now been born. So what's going on here? A Jew, an Arab, and a cow. What is this kind of a joke? What's going on here? This was obviously a metaphor. And it was a story the Medrash says, but it tells you, says the Rebbe, that in the moment that the temple was destroyed, the redemption was born. Mashiach was born. What does it tell you? It tells you that the destruction itself is the building. The exile itself is part of the building. It's not a destruction and a waiting period that we wait for the holy temple to be rebuilt. It is a destruction of the temple, but begins right away the incubation period. Meaning that everything, whatever we go through in this exile, it is a harsh exile. And we ask Hashem to put an end to it. We can't take it anymore. But it says that when Mashiach comes, we will thank Hashem for these challenges, for these difficult times. Because this is an incubation period that allows us, there's an incubation period that allows us to build within ourselves, to strengthen, to flex our muscles, so to speak, and thereby prepare ourselves for the beautiful future. Let's see the way the Rebbe explains it. Says the Rebbe, the destruction of the temple and the redemption and rebuilding of the temple are not separate by a lapse. Rather, immediately when the temple was destroyed, the beginning of the redemption arrived. Physically, in the land of Israel, the Redeemer was born. But it's not just that. He says it emerges that these two aspects of Shabbos Chazayin are not contradictory. We said before about Shabbos Chazayin. On the one hand, Chazayin is about this vision of the destruction of the temple. And yet on the other end, we say that this Shabbos is Chazayin, that this is a vision that every Jew has a vision seeing the holy temple be, the third Beis HaMikdash. It says it's not a contradictory at all, but rather they go hand in hand and allow one another. In the destruction of the temple, we can see the building of the third temple. This empowers us to not be fazed by challenges of the current darkness, but instead to increase our divine service throughout the period of exile. The Rebbe spoke many times about we have the concept of seeing the people who gave times when Mashiach is supposed to come. In the old the Gemara says, the Rambam mentions this also, that we are not allowed to have to say times that give times when Mashiach is supposed to come. The Gemara uses an expression tipach rucham shel mechashvei kitzim, that let them disappear, those who figure deadlines and give you dates when Mashiach is coming. And why? Because it did more harm than good. But yet, says the Rebbe, we do find many of the great sages that did give dates and said, oh, and this date, Mashiach is supposed to come. And how could you reconcile this? And the Rebbe explained that this, what we just explained, gives a good explanation. That when the Talmud says that we're not supposed to give dates, this is because when you make a date, you say, okay, this is it. And this date, Mashiach has come, and people said, okay, this date is past, the Mashiach didn't come, so they lose hope, they lose faith and everything. That's not a good thing. But when the sages saw that the people need encouragement, when the sages realize that they will get encouragement when they see that there's certain periods, certain times that is very auspicious time for Mashiach to come, and the sages are able to see it. And why? So here's the story of the two visions. Because we have the vision when you see the destruction, but if you have a more sensitive eye, you're able to see within the destruction, you're able to see the vision of redemption. And the great sages, they saw but certain dates, and they saw that this is a very special time when Mashiach can come. They saw the redemption, that they're able to come. They were able to bring the redemption. And that they felt that will give encouragement to the people to strengthen themselves. And if they would be doing the right thing, Mashiach would have come. And indeed, some other spiritual benefits came out in those times that they said. But the point is that the sages, they were able to see within the darkness, they were able to see the redemption. They were able to see the redemption within the challenges. Just like when you have you put a seed in the ground and the seed grows a beautiful tree. But before the tree grows, the seed rots and it loses its whole identity. But if you're wise, if you understand, you're able to see within this rotten piece, you can see the future, you can see the tree growing. So the challenges that we have, when we focus on the positive, when we focus on the good that is coming out of it, then we will be able to see it. We will be able to change our attitude towards these challenges. And that is true both when we're talking about challenges with the exile in general, and also in our own challenges. When people go through difficulties in life, when you look at the difficulties as a way that Hashem says, I want a better version of you. And we take this challenge in a positive light, with a positive attitude, and we say, okay, Hashem gave me a challenge, so now what? What do I need to do? Instead of losing hope and saying, oh, I'm going to mourn for the rest of my life, I'm worth nothing, I'm garnished. Instead of that, you say, wait a second, Hashem gave me a challenge. It's now difficult. That means that there is something better that I can become. What is it? And you focus in that way, then you're able to bring it out from you. This is the beautiful message of this Shabbos Chazain, this Shabbos of the vision that we see the Beis Hamikdash, and when Mashiach will come, we will indeed be able to see this beautiful, good things that came out of this terrible exile and sufferings. We all ask Hashem that the suffering should end. But the good news is that the end is very near. The good news is that the end, not only the end is near, but the redemption is already shining here. As the Rebbe said, that when he said about the coming of Mashiach that is imminent, that it's coming so close, it's not just like it's another date that we say, oh, Mashiach is going to come very soon, but it's more than that. It is something that the Rebbe sees that it's already happening. It's already here. All we need to do is increase in acts of goodness and kindness, increase in studying of the Torah, as the Rebbe says, especially the Torah regarding Mashiach, regarding the redemption. The more we connect with it, the more we'll be able to bring it out from ourselves and affecting and influencing others. And let's hope that this Shabbos Chazain will not only have the vision, the spiritual vision of Mashiach, but we will actually have the physical seeing of the Beis Hamikdash Ashlishi, because we're going to be with Mashiach in Yerushalayim. Amen. Very, very soon. Amen. So if anybody has questions, you can feel free to ask now. Thank you very much for joining. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and share these words of Torah and redemption to the rest of the world. Thank you.